Good morning, Arthur.
Good morning, Barbara. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you. It's a pleasure and privilege to have you here in Vienna at the beautiful Hotel Sacher, where we're sitting in the salon. And
For me too, by the way. It's wonderful.
That's great. Arthur, I have something that made you world famous.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. This is the famous Laffer curve. Would you briefly explain what this means?
Sure. It's fairly simple that, when you change taxes, tax rates, there are two effects that have. Let's say we raise tax rates. It is very clear that you're going to collect more revenue per dollar of tax base. That's true. But if you raise tax rates, you reduce people's incentives to do the activity, and they will do less of the activity. So these two effects, what I call the arithmetic effect and the economic effect, they always work in the opposite direction. And what happens is sometimes the economic effect dominates and sometimes the arithmetic effect dominates. For example, at 100% taxes. So if every time you go to the office, instead of getting a paycheck, you get a bill, everyone would stop working and there'll be no tax revenues. Likewise, at zero tax rates, there'll be no revenues. A lot of output, a lot of work, but no revenues. So when you start raising tax rates from the lowest point, the arithmetic effect always dominates until you get to a certain point where all of a sudden the economic effect starts dominating, which we call the prohibitive range. But there's a curve that relates tax rates to total revenues, which is this. And I tried to do this with politicians because before this time, and by the way, this is not my idea. It goes back centuries and centuries and centuries. A lot of economists have done this curve. But in recent times, when I was there, they always assumed that a 10% increase in tax rates would be a 10% increase in revenues. That's not true. It's never true. Now, sometimes it'll be a 9% increase in revenues, but sometimes it'll be a reduction in revenues. And you've got to consider the economic effects of taxes. And that's all this does.
In other words, if we reduce taxes, the revenue of the government will increase. It can.
Sometimes if you're at zero taxes and you raise tax rates, you'll get more revenue. You will. But as you keep going up and up and up, there's a point at which you raise taxes any more, and then you start losing revenues. And no one should ever, ever, ever do that. They should never tax in the range where they're losing revenues from lower tax rates. They just shouldn't.
So, in other words, competition also for taxes is most important.
It's really important. And everyone talks about competition amongst companies and amongst suppliers and demanders and all of that stuff. Competition amongst governments is 10 times more important than competition among suppliers or demanders or what have you.
What about competition of states or municipalities?
Well, that's what happens in the U.S. That's where a lot of my work has been, is watching how states compete for jobs, for business, for output, for employment, for prosperity. And it's amazing how that competition works to control the excesses of government. It's just amazing. Municipalities. I've got this book coming out called Wealth of States 2, where you look at what's happened when municipalities raise taxes excessively or overly regulate or do other such silly things. It's amazing the bad consequences that occur.
So in other words, you rate or rank those cities, municipalities and states? I
have for 10 years now officially ranked every state from number 1 to number 50. In the U.S. based upon 15 supply-side characteristics: the corporate tax rate, the personal income tax rate, the degree of progressivity, right to work, minimum wage, all of these supply-side variables. We rank them down, and we take every state, and then we rank the states by those that are most pro-growth and those that are least pro-growth. And then we relate that to their actual performance, and it fits like a glove.
And in other words, those are the pull factors for businesses to invest and to come to these places.
Exactly. That is exactly what it is.
So competition after all.
Competition after all amongst governments, which is really the most wonderful thing. That's why I have a problem here in Europe. Because when I look at the European Union, there isn't any real competition amongst governments. You've got Brussels trying to make everyone the same. You don't want everyone the same, Barbara. You want some countries trying this policy, some countries trying that policies, and the ones that are a little bit more successful will win, and then someone else will try a new innovation, and there'll be a new thing going on. And what you've got now in Europe, unfortunately, is this stifling of innovation. It's a stifling of experimentation. It's a stifling of allowing people to choose which one they want. And, some states like New York or like Vermont or like California choose very high taxes. And you would think that that would be great because they get very good public services. But they don't. California's educational system is the fourth lowest in the nation. And they have the highest paid teachers and the highest taxes in the nation. Go figure.
Eventually, people will leave California.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
But, if they don't, if they like it that
they
way.
vote with their feet.
And if they like it that way, God bless them. They have a perfect right to have a rotten economy if that's what they want.
Okay, but eventually they will not be able to afford this much longer.
Well, you never know. It goes for a long, long time. It took Detroit, what? In 1950, Detroit had a population of 1.85 million. Today, Detroit's population is 685,000. It's been a collapse. When I was a kid, my mom and dad would take me to the train station, and we'd go on vacation to Detroit. Can you imagine that? I mean, the train station in Detroit was the Taj Mahal. It was the most wonderfully elegant. It was the Paris of North America. Now it's the garbage dump of North America. It's just tragic.
But if we believe in innovation, and this is what Austrian economists do, there will be an opportunity coming up.
I think so. And I think the more competition you allow amongst governments, the better off you will be. Now, this is the message I took to Bratislava when I did the keynote for the economic section of the EU 4 weeks ago. And that's the message I took. I said, having a common government, when politicians cooperate with each other, it's almost always they cooperate on how to exploit the people. And that's not what you want.
In other words, if we rephrase Lady Thatcher, who said the lady is not for turning, you may turn if you want to, we should really tell our politicians exactly.
Don't you remember that?
We should tell the politicians in Brussels it's time now that you may turn or must turn eventually to save Europe.
Yes, I think that's very true. Otherwise, you're going to see a very long, dark slide into the Dark Ages again. And you remember what brought the Dark Ages on before was a common government, and you got another one coming.
Well, this brings us to actually the reason why you are here. You will receive the Hayek Lifetime Achievement Award 2016. Well, thank you for accepting it, also on behalf of the jury. But as Hayek pointed out in one of his big works, The Road to Serfdom, which he dedicated to the socialists in all parties. How dangerous central governments are. I mean, this is exactly the point that we are working on, right? What do you take?
I knew von Hayek, and I loved him. I had the great honor of introducing him as the speaker. So I can't tell you how honored I am to be receiving the von Hayek Lifetime Achievement Award.
We are honored that you have accepted it and that you join us here in Vienna, and we are looking forward to this gala tonight. And we want to thank you for coming in and also for your great work that you have been doing
thank you.
In the past years, for your productivity and constantly, not only publishing, writing papers and working so hard on those issues. Please continue to do so. We need you, Arthur.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you.